Mr. Dims always played red. And that, I suppose, is how these things work. The checkers board lived on the little round table by the window. Nobody owned it. It just belonged there, the way the dusty ficus plant belonged there, and the crooked clock that never quite agreed with the hallway clock. Someone had left a little radio on the windowsill years ago. It was the only thing making background noise in that corner of the place. An old cassette tape recording we would flip over when it ran out. Talk shows, news segments, things taped off the air sometime in the late 90s. Residents came and went through the chair across from me. Some stayed weeks, some only days. Most of them liked to sit there and talk. Mr. Dims always took the red pieces. He said it wasn't superstition, he just preferred red. That morning he was losing badly. The ash from his cigarette hung at the end of it like a collapsing bridge while he stared at the board. Technically, smoking wasn't allowed anymore, but rules had a way of softening around men who'd already outlived most of their doctors. "You know what fascinates me about the cigarette thing?" he said. He tapped the ash onto a little ceramic dish shaped like a seashell. It wasn't that people were fooled. I slid one of my black pieces forward. Sure they were. "No," he said calmly. "That's the myth. People suspected. They just preferred doubt." He lifted one of his checkers and moved it diagonally. If you give someone two choices, certainty or doubt, they'll take doubt every time if certainty requires sacrifice. I shrugged. Or they were just addicted. That too. The cigarette crackled faintly as he took a drag. They didn't have to convince people smoking was safe. They only had to make the science look unsettled. I remember laughing. "Worked for 40 years. Mr. Dims smiled at that in a way that was almost approving. Longer than that, depending how you count. Somewhere behind us, the radio crackled softly. A caller on some old talk show was arguing about whether computers would fail when the year changed. I must have heard the tape a dozen times before. But it came through clearly this time while we were both silent, planning our next moves. It was sometime around then that I mentioned my story. I didn't announce it dramatically. I just slipped into the conversation the way old stories do when there isn't much else to talk about. I told Mr. Dims about the lights over the quarry, about the thing that came down, about the silence that followed, about the camera that stopped working, the car that arrived 3 days later. Black. The men who stepped out of it didn't look strange the way the movies say they do. They looked normal. Normal in a way that felt deliberate. Like someone had studied the idea of an ordinary person and carefully built one. Mr. Dims didn't interrupt me. He kept moving pieces on the board. Red, black, red, black. After that day, something changed. He still nodded when we passed in the hall, but the checkers game stopped. Weeks went by. Then the diagnosis came. Terminal. The staff started speaking around him instead of to him. He didn't complain. He just began sitting by the window again, without the board. It was late one afternoon when he asked, "Care for a game?" The board was already set up, red pieces waiting. He didn't smoke that day. His hands shook too much. "Tell me the whole story," he said quietly. "Everything that happened." So I told him again. This time I included the part that always bothered me the most. It wasn't the lights or the thing, not the car. The part after that. How people smiled politely, how friends joked about it. How strangers online dissected every detail until the story sounded ridiculous even to me. "They didn't even have to call me a liar," I said. "They just shrugged." Mr. Dims nodded slowly. "Yes. That's usually how it works." I looked up. "Works?" He rested his hands on the edge of the table. For a long time he said nothing. Then he sighed. "I suppose it doesn't matter anymore. I wasn't avoiding you because I thought you were lying. I avoided you because I knew exactly what had happened." I stared at him. "You saw something too?" He shook his head. "No." He moved a red checker forward. "I was the one who came afterward. Not to you specifically. It was just my job dealing with people in your shoes." The piece clicked softly into place. I was one of the men who knocked on doors after sightings. He explained that the program once used intimidation, door knocks, film confiscation, threats. But around the year 2000, after the strange cultural moment of Y2K, intelligence agencies learned something important. Y2K actually did break systems. Banks patched code. Airlines rewrote software. Governments spent billions fixing real problems. But when midnight came and the lights stayed on, people laughed. The catastrophe had been prevented, but the public concluded nothing had ever been wrong, and intelligence analytics noticed something fascinating. Reality didn't matter, only the perception of it. So the program changed. No more black cars, no more visits. Just noise. Endless, polite, reasonable doubt. He placed the last checker. "You think I tried to convince people? You're wrong." He shook his head. "We didn't need to." He looked up at me. "We only needed to make sure no one was certain you were right." As he spoke, the little radio on the windowsill crackled again. Another old call-in show. A man laughing about Y2K panic. "See?" the caller said. "Nothing happened." The board sat between us. Red pieces scattered like little coins across the table. I remember noticing he had me cornered on the left side. I'd been so distracted listening to him that I hadn't paid attention to the game. Mr. Dims leaned back in his chair and rubbed his hands together slowly. The tremor had gotten worse. Neither of us spoke. The room had that late afternoon glow the place always got around dinner time. The sun came through the tall windows and turned the dust in the air into tiny drifting stars. Then he cleared his throat. "You didn't ask me," he said. "Why nobody ever believed you." I nodded. "You were expecting the wrong kind of opposition." He tapped the table gently with one finger. "If someone shows up at your door in a black suit, people assume you must be important." And he smiled. "But if nobody shows up," his finger moved on to the red piece and pushed it forward, "then nothing important ever happened." The checker clicked softly against the board. He looked at me for a long moment. "You know something? You saw something real," he said. "I know." He said it the way someone might confirm the weather. Then he pushed his chair back, slowly and carefully. We didn't finish the checker game. He stood up and adjusted his cardigan. I'm tired. Mr. Dims got up and walked to his room. I never saw him again. Not alive. They found him sometime after midnight. Peaceful, the nurse said. As if he'd simply gone to sleep. But the night nurse mentioned something strange when she told me. A man had come by earlier. Not family, not staff. Just someone asking for Mr. Dims by name. She said he stayed only a minute, long enough to step into the room and close the door. The checkers board stayed on the table by the window. No one moved the pieces, not for weeks. One morning I decided to clear it. The place had a way of freezing small moments in place. I suppose I wanted the room to feel normal again. I reached down to start putting the pieces back in the box. That's when I noticed something. Mr. Dims had been wrong. He didn't have me cornered, not at all. In fact, the next move would have given me a king. It was obvious once I looked at the board properly. So obvious that I wondered how either of us could have missed it. There was no way. I couldn't have just overlooked it. Somebody had to have changed it after the fact. That had to be it, right? Later that afternoon, a new resident sat down across from me. The little radio on the windowsill had reached the end of the tape sometime that morning. The reels inside it spun with a faint clicking sound until he got up and flipped the cassette over. He asked about the board. I told him the story. The quarry, the lights, the car, Mr. Dims. He listened politely, nodded a few times. When I finished, he shrugged a little. Memory plays tricks on people, he said. Especially when they're old. I nodded. That seemed reasonable. Reasonable enough that I almost believed it. Then the caller I had heard a dozen times said it again. See? Nothing happened. And that, I suppose, is how these things work.